Hi, this is Eric Smith. Time to do another quick look video, and I thought I would do it from the 50th Psalm, verse 21, and the Word of God reads this way. These things you have done, and I kept silent. You thought that I was altogether like you, but I will rebuke you and set them in order before your eyes. In this particular verse, in the 50th Psalm, we have something really important that we need to remember as Christians. And we need to even remind the unsaved person. Now, the context of verse 21 in Psalm 50, when it says, these things you have done, the things that were being done were wicked things. There were things that were sinful. And he says, these things you have done, and I kept silent. Now, this does not mean that God doesn't see it, that God won't judge it, but sometimes the unsaved world and even believers will think, they can sin, they can do wickedness, and because God's not doing anything about it, or even bringing a prophet and saying anything about it, that God doesn't see it and that God's not going to judge it. And then the middle of the verse says, you thought that I was altogether like you. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. That's important. And then it says, but I will rebuke you. God is saying, I'm going to rebuke your sin. I'm going to rebuke the things that you're doing and set them in order before your eyes. Because God is a just God. He's going to set in order the things that people do that are sinful, and God's going to judge it correctly, and He's going to do it justly because God is a righteous judge, and He's a just God. But catch the middle of verse 21. It says, you thought that I was altogether like you. And you know what? That is the problem. Not just in this situation when it came to sin. They thought, you know what? I can sin and do everything because God is just like me. Well, you know what? A lot of times, believers and unbelievers alike believe this about God. They want to take God, who's high and lifted up on His throne, and bring Him down to our level so we think that God is just like us. And we need to understand in the scriptures, it tells us that God is unique. In fact, when we try to make God like us, He's no longer unique and He's no longer God. That's why even Christians sometimes will take away attributes of God or redefine them to make God look like us. So when we see God in sovereign control, sometimes we want to make God like a sovereign human king that is in control of a kingdom but doesn't know what's going on. Or we're talking about God's attribute of love, and we want to make it sappy and emotional and not a holy love. Sometimes we can see God's grace, mercy, and we can think, oh, that everybody deserves grace and mercy, not understanding that God's grace and mercy is way above that. So we could take all these attributes of God, all the things that the Bible tells us about God, and what we want to do in our own mind is redefine it and make God like us. In that way, what we can do is we can continue to disobey and sin, because if we think a particular sin isn't a sin or something that's okay, then we're going to think God is like that too when we make God that way. God is not like man. God is God. And when you try to degrade who God is, or devalue who God is, or misinterpret who God is, particularly even misinterpret His word, you are on dangerous ground, because God is no longer God, and you can't do that. Particularly if you profess to be a believer and a lover of God, like you love God. Now, when I say lover of God, I don't mean the human way of being a lover, but I'm talking about you love God and you fear God, then you know what? You do not try to make God like you. So this is Psalm 50, verse 21. I just wanted to do a quick look to seriously warn believers and unbelievers alike. Don't think that God is like you. God is unique. In fact, we derive everything from God. All we can do is twist it. We can take God's good commands and we can make them subjective. But where does it come from? A self-existent God who is the beginning and end of all things. We could take some attributes of God and we can emulate those attributes in some respect, but there's some things about God that we can't emulate at all. We are not infinite. We are not eternal. We are not self-existent. We're not even sovereign like God. So don't make God like you. As always, if the videos on this channel have encouraged your Christian walk and edified you in any way whatsoever, but you have not subscribed to my channel yet and you want to, hit the button. If you want to leave any comments, please do so, but please do not be snarky. Please do not be profane. We want to be Christ-like in everything we say and do as Christians. And until we do another quick look, when you read this verse, you have to understand that God is a unique God. And God says in other Bible verses, His ways are not our ways. We have to stop making God be like us to appease us. Because that's all we're doing. We're trying to appease us. And we're trying to do things that we shouldn't be doing. So if we like a particular sin or we like disobeying, then notice our God likes the same thing. And the unsaved world does that all the time. But if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, if you believe in God because you've been saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, don't ever do that, because God is God and you are not. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and God bless.